Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Bernie Sanders ekes out a win. Elizabeth Warren fades. And Biden tanks.
Hell yeah.
Meanwhile, the entire federal prosecuting team, Roger Stone, resigns in the wake of Bill Barr overruling their sentencing recommendation. Meanwhile, Democrats in the Senate demand an investigation into Barr's handling, as it were. And polls show Sanders now leading with non-white voters and gained 10 points with black voters since Iowa. As Trump's revenge rages on, a Treasury Secretary nominee is withdrawn. Speaking of raging on, coronavirus may be transmittable through bathroom pipes. Trump also now seeking military discipline against Colonel Vindman. The culinary union in Nevada hits Sanders on Medicare for All. Mike Bloomberg, still awful, and I don't know if he's getting awfuler. We just replaying the greatest hits. Republicans seize the light on healthcare when they get sick. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of sick, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Everybody here is pretty exhausted. We may, hopefully, do a shorter show than normal today. But you know how that usually works out. We usually end up going 20 minutes longer than the average show.
You don't think water should be regulated? Oh, pray tell for 45 minutes. It's only 2:15.
Well, there's a very good chance that might happen.
I think you're confusing freedom.
Oh my God, thank you.
To help with connectivity.
We were just about to stop the show. Now I'd like to give you 50 minutes.
Exactly. That is not, that's conceivable. I don't know what else to tell you. That's conceivable. But we will go through the New Hampshire primary results. Just a reminder, on Wednesday, February 19th, that is a week from today, there will be a debate in Nevada. We will be on vacation. However, I am going to endeavor to do some debate coverage from a remote location. So we'll see. And the Nevada primary, or I should say caucus, is on the 22nd, which is, of course, let's see, Thursday's the 20th, Friday's the 21st. It's on a Saturday. So that'll be good, at least to get a little bit more of an attendance, or at least an opportunity for an attendance. We will talk about this interesting dynamic with the culinary union. We've been talking about this for a while. We got a phone call about a week ago, or 2 days ago, or 15 minutes ago. I can't tell anymore. But from someone who I believe was either in the culinary the union, or was, and also their brother-in-law or their sister-in-law was as well. And he let us know that they were beginning to promote the idea that Sanders was going to destroy their health care. And we will talk about that. Apparently, that has gone now live, and we have a flyer that is both in English and Spanish.
There was somebody at Michael's live show who worked for a union that said there was like some Red Scare vibes about Medicare for All in the one he was working with too.
I mean, in particularly in Nevada, the culinary union is huge, and huge both in terms of size. I think there's some 150,000 members, and I mean, because obviously it's Vegas, and they're a huge force. So we shall see how that shakes out.
I've heard some, at least Chuck Rocha is saying pretty publicly, like, we're gonna go. I mean, it's what you'd expect them to say, but they're gonna go directly to rank and file union members. And I've seen some interesting. This might be very revealing about what's happening in unions right now, because there's some perception I've seen like in terms of pushback, which is like, it's not exactly like rank and file union members are incredibly excited about what their sort of underperforming leadership has to say. On the other hand, I mean, loss aversion is loss aversion, and people who are already hounded and terrorized in general by politics might be scared of and risk averse, which makes sense. But
some people are scared and risk averse. Other people just like having something that other people don't have, unfortunately.
I think with the Culinary Workers Union, it would be more risk averse, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research shows that people are more afraid of losing something that they have than
the
not
Danny
getting
Ariely thing, right?
Yeah,
I think he was
sure.
he was an Israeli behavioral economist.
All right, well, let's go into this. Just find that, Matt, as we go. Here is what is this? This one is which one is this video? Okay, yeah. Now, there's a lot of stuff coming out about Mike Bloomberg, and we're going to get into some of it today, because Mike Bloomberg has been basically living in what is, I consider, a parallel universe in terms of this campaign. I don't think there's ever been, at least in my recollection, in modern era, and, you know, primaries are really modern era creatures, where you have a situation where a candidate has been in no debates, participates in none of the primaries or caucuses, the first four, waits till Super Tuesday to jump in, and then also, well, maybe Ross Perot was around there, but he was not in a primary, but also is polling like Michael Bloomberg is. And I think that if you could ever say that something was a bubble, this is a bubble, because he has been inflating his numbers by going on air and presenting himself like a commodity. I'm a Snickers bar, right? I mean, you just have the opportunity to go out and advertise all the attributes of a Snickers bar. There's peanuts, there's caramel, there's chocolate. Oh, that sounds good. What you don't have is someone else standing by going like, oh, and that's also, 300 calories and for 1/4 of the bar. And the caramel is made in a plant somewhere where, it's completely tainted. I'm not talking about specifically about any type of brand of candy bar. I don't know what I'm not maligning any candy. I'm saying generally, not Snickers. I'm saying Snickers. Let's call it a different bar or whatever it is.
Ironic analogy considering Bloomberg's crusade against sugar.
Indeed. But
candy should have debates.
Exactly. But the idea being that he's out there selling himself without any critique, without any pushback at this point, because A, he hasn't been in the debates, and B, nobody's taking him that seriously as of yet. However, as a public service to you, we're going to remind you why we have been mocking Michael Bloomberg here since his tenure as mayor in the later years. Here is Michael Bloomberg at I don't know, the International Monetary Fund. Is that really what it is? Or did we just put that behind him because we wanted it to really make the point of how much of an oligarch he is? Here he is he's got a one-on-one with Lagarde. She's former, right? Head of, she's still ongoing head of the International Monetary Fund. And I happen to be in favor of the...
Sorry, I believe she's at the European Central Bank now.
Okay. I happen to be in favor of some of the policies that were instituted under the Bloomberg administration regarding taxation and food. For instance, trans fats were outlawed. Those are plastics that were literally, you would eat them. They were sort of edible plastics, I guess, in the same way that really anything you can digest and actually ingest, I should say, is edible. Those were outlawed. He raised the taxes on cigarettes to where it became prohibitive for most people to smoke. He raised the taxation on sugary drinks and capped, I think, the size of slushies. Now, these policies on some level are regressive until these products simply don't exist and people switch to other products. So where people go from sodas to water, let's say, or to juice, or to, tea. And until people stop smoking cigarettes, in which case it's not regressive anymore. But they are somewhat regressive policies. However, there's also a lot of externalities that the rest of us bear with things like drinks that are just sugar transport vehicles that create, epidemic of diabetes.
Oh, you're making Matt thirsty.
Yeah, I'm sure. And however, what is really telling about Mike Bloomberg, just like he did with Stop and Frisk, and we will go through some of those quotes and numbers as well. He does not see this policy in that regard. He sees the little people as little people. He honestly talks about human beings as if he is a god. They are not even a different class of human being to him. They are literally a different species that he just oversees in some fashion.
He's playing SimCity.
It really is. Here he is talking about those sugary drinks.
Some people say, well, taxes are regressive, but in this case, yes, they are. That's the good thing about them, because the problem is in people that don't have a lot of money. And so higher taxes should have a bigger impact on their behavior and how they deal with themselves. So I listen to people saying, oh, we don't want to tax the poor. Well, we want the poor to live longer so that they can get an education and enjoy life. And that's why you do want to do exactly what a lot of people say you don't want to do. The question is, do you want to pander to those people, or do you want to get them to live longer? And there's just no question. If you raise taxes on full sugary drinks, for example, they will drink less. And there's just no question that full sugar drinks are one of the major contributors to obesity, and obesity is one of the major contributors to heart disease and cancer and a variety of other things. So it's like saying, I don't want to stop using coal because coal miners will go out of work. Well, will lose their jobs. We have a lot of soldiers in the United States, in the U.S. Army, but we don't want to go start a war just to give them something to do. And that's exactly what you're saying when you say, well, let's keep coal killing people because we don't want coal miners to lose their jobs. The truth of the matter is there aren't very many coal miners left anyway.
All right, well, listen, he's getting a little bit off the topic. But first off, just going backwards to forward, in fact, I think we are highly incentivized to go to war because it just so happens that we do that all the time. I think for his buddies to make a lot of money in the military-industrial complex. But here's the point. He almost gets there with the coal miners. He almost gets there as to what is missing from his calculation. First off, the idea that we want them to live longer so they get a better education and enjoy life. I'm all for people being lifelong students. But the idea that at the end of their lives, you have a significant number of people going out and getting an education at that point doesn't make any sense. They could get an education in their 20s or in their teens.
No.
And this is the weird, creepy thing as he talks about this. When you look at the plans to get this country off of coal that are presented, they always involved something to the effect of, we need to retrain coal miners. We need to provide for them. The Green New Deal says we'll retrain you. And if you don't feel like you can be retrained and find another job at age 50 or some odd, then we'll pay you to not be coal miners. So it is a human-centric policy. If Mike Bloomberg had the same perspective and was genuinely concerned, I mean, look, I get that you say that it's a burden on the system to have this many people with diabetes. I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say. But if you genuinely had the concern that he pretends he has about wanting poor people to live longer lives, maybe not, as opposed to I would need people to come and clean my offices.
So bring me my big gay ice cream.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Then what he was in the position of doing is we're going to do a special type of nutritional enterprise zones where bodegas that have X amount of fresh fruit or fresh produce will get a tax abatement. I mean, they do tax abatements all the time. We're living in the middle of a massive tax abatement for property taxes around here. And I got news for you. I'm looking out the window. They don't need it. They're getting apartments. They're renting apartments for $5,000 for a studio apartment or something. And they're getting tax abatements. This happens. There's a lot of things that he could do.
Maybe some well-funded community health clinics.
Health clinics, nutritional support. I mean, if that's what he's on with the sugary stuff.
I mean, the biggest predictor of life expectancy is someone's income. So maybe attack economic inequality.
There's a whole host of other things he could do.
Well, and not only did he not do those, Matt Karp did a great headshot where Bloomberg just wrote a column a couple weeks ago saying part of basically I'm running to take on income inequality. And he did a double head, and the other one was OJ seeks out the real killer.
Right.
And I think the others, but it's really important because this reminds me of Macron in the sense that not only did Bloomberg not do all of these other things, or even just use his national leadership to talk about agriculture subsidies and protecting family farms or advocating for some form of universal health care, right? Like even if it's not going to be single payer, something that would have been constructive. What they do with these policies on climate and health, because they're so classist and punitive, is they undermine broader public support for things we really urgently need to tackle. And I think, Trump and Bloomberg is that's a classic choice because Trump will just say he's going to take away your guns, going to take away your soda, and he doesn't trust you to live your life. And it'll be an effective message.
Plus, I was heavily invested in Arizona iced tea.
Right.
Who knows?
I'm sure if you go through the portfolio,
wouldn't be hard to find.
Yeah.
Folks, as you know, if you're anything like me and you're very busy, it's hard to find the time to sit down and read because you have your child and both your children. They come over and they say, Dad, what are you doing? It looks like you're enjoying yourself or you're taking a couple minutes for yourself. We need to end that right now. Fortunately, there's an incredible app called Blinkist. It's going to be your new secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead in life and just expanding your horizons. And you can do it quick enough without your kids realizing that you're actually learning something or engaging in something other than their whim at the moment. Blinkist takes the best key takeaways, the need-to-know information, the top lines, if you will, folks, the bullet points from thousands of nonfiction books, condenses them down in just 15 minutes. You can listen to it or you can read it. And you can do it on your phone. You can do it on your tablet. your iPad, your web browser, whatever it is. Blinkist is made for busy people who want to get to the main points of a book quickly. They make it easy to find a book during your commute, to read a book, or to hear a book, I should say, or to get through the whole thing on the course of your commute, on your lunch break, while you've locked yourself in the bathroom and told your kids you're in the middle of something, whatever it is, just to get away from them. I love it. And I've mentioned this before. There are books that. There's a lot of books that I'm like, I'm not going to invest this much time to read that. But there's still like a little nagging something pulling at me like, well, maybe I should try and just figure out what's in this. Like entrepreneurial books or how to be more polite or there's some, I'm not going to name names, but there's some nonfiction books that I'm like, I'm not going to read that book. I don't like that person or I don't like their perspective. But then at the same time, I'm like, I should know, though. I should know what they're writing. And that's what this Blinkist is really great for me. Your mileage may vary in some way, but you will find a reason why this is really indispensable. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or to listen to what is like a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. And you do this all for one low price. For a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You try it for 7 days and for free. And then with your new subscription, you get 25% off. That's Blinkist, BLINKIST.com/Majority Report. Start your 7-day free trial, save 25%. I mentioned before how I checked out like the 4-hour work week, but
each time you mention that book, your amount of hours you put in a week goes up.
Every time I mention,
yeah, you need to Blinkist that book again.
There is, I do actually, and that's the beauty of it. I can get a refresher. There's a couple like this American Carnage by Tim Alberta. It is about the Republican Civil War and the rise of President Trump. This is the type of book I would read just to sort of like base my understanding of what happened against this, but I'm not going to invest my whole time in it. And I'll get it in 15 minutes. You can check that out. There's a ton of others. You can sign up now at Blinkist.com/Majority Report. That's Blinkist.com/Majority Report. All right, let's get back a little bit to Mike Bloomberg, and then, we'll get to Mike Bloomberg in a bit. Let's do the recap.
Do we need to talk about my proposal to jail every single black male born in the United States at birth for their own good until they're 40, and then they'll be let out for an internship program at Bloomberg?
We will.
No one ever looks at the long-term plans. But look, I understand as of 6 months ago that was a mistake.
All right, we will. Exactly. My advisors told me as soon as I ran that it was a mistake, and I agreed with them. So last night, the New Hampshire primary took place. Bernie Sanders won, but he did not win by much. He got and this is with just about 95% reporting. I don't know if we have the full 100% yet. Where are we at? Is that, let's see, 2 minutes ago, we were at 294, so 98% reporting. Okay, so what we have is Bernie Sanders came in first with almost 26% of the vote, 25.7%. That got him 9 pledged delegates. Pete Buttigieg had about 3,500 less votes. So Sanders had 75,000, almost 76,000. Buttigieg had a little more than 72,000 votes.
God damn it. Who are all these people voting for that little rat bastard?
He got 24.4% of the vote. He got 9 delegates. Then in what was by all accounts a surprise, although I credit where credit's due, Virgil Texas yesterday predicted Amy Klobuchar. I don't think she did a little bit better than he thought she would, but he did predict her to become in third. He wasn't sure. He thought she'd be more on the cusp of qualifying for delegates. That would have been 15%. She ended up with almost 20% at 19.8%. She got 6 delegates.
Actually, New Hampshire is the perfect state for Amy Klobuchar.
I mean,
I think
gotta be
she's
tough.
a very strong candidate for New Hampshire. We'll
I
see.
did see more Amy signs than Warren signs when I was driving around.
she got more than twice the vote, and but nobody. I mean, nobody was predicting this even a week ago.
Not this margin, but if you told me, I mean, I should have put this out. I think
Probably.
third. You didn't think that she would get third place in New Hampshire? No, honestly.
I did
You
not.
really thought that was such a unique prediction?
I certainly wouldn't have thought that. Certainly not before the debate, and even after the debate, I didn't think that she would get third place. No,
I definitely
By
didn't think
20 by
20,
doubling?
but
No.
not by 20. But I thought she would be clustered with Warren and probably ahead.
Warren came in fourth with 9%. That netted her no delegates. Joe Biden came in fifth. Joe Biden got 30. Oh wait, yeah. Will you put that down? What is that? What's that? That's Joe Biden got 24,000 votes with 8.5%, 0 delegates. In fact, others did better than Joe Biden. But I mean, I guess that's a bunch of people. We lost 2 candidates last night. Andrew Yang dropped out of the race, as did Michael Bennett. Deval Patrick still hanging in there. He had 0.4% of the vote last night. Tulsi Gabbard got 3.3% of the vote. Tom Steyer, 3.6% of the vote. Just scroll down. I think there was Joe Sestak still doing all right. Kamala Harris.
I thought Sestak dropped out a while
ago. He did. And so did John Delaney. So did Julian Castro and Bullock. And all those other people. I mean, there's a lot of people who got some write-ins. I did not get any, apparently, which is a little disturbing. But that's okay.
Vote for Bernie.
I mean, the fact is that Bernie Sanders underperformed. I think he, relative to the final polling, I think he underperformed a bit. I think he underperformed insofar as the standards in which we have been, or at least I have been, assessing his candidacy, in that he is supposedly bringing out new voters who are low propensity voters, who, by definition of being low propensity, would be less likely to be polled or considered in the polls as a likely voter. Nevertheless, the flatness of this race, the parity that exists, and because Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar have not literally, but about as close as you can get to literally no support in the African-American community, maybe a little bit more, but not much more in the Latino community. Now, that could change. I feel like it could particularly change in Klobuchar's instance for the time being, but I don't think it's going to change dramatically. So it really is tough to predict what's going to happen at this point. I would imagine that Joe Biden is out of the race by the time we get to Super Tuesday. Elizabeth Warren, I think she's going to wait to see how she does in Nevada. We will talk a little bit about that in a bit, because certainly the culinary union went at Sanders much harder than Warren, although they credit both of them with supporting Medicare for all. They are more concerned about Sanders, it seems like. But we will get to that in a bit. Sanders dominated in the youth vote. The turnout numbers were higher than 2008, or at least comparable. However, I don't know how that rates with the increase in population. It has been 12 years. One would anticipate a higher population, particularly in a state like New Hampshire, where one gets the sense that more people are pouring into the state.
Well, you really know how to suck the joy out of a victory, Sam.
Well, I mean, I think people should be happy about it, but I don't think anybody should be overly confident by any stretch. There's going to have to be a lot of work to do. Bernie Sanders is going to have to win in Nevada. If Bernie Sanders does not win in Nevada, and do quite well in South Carolina, it's going to make Super Tuesday even that much more tenuous.
It's like calibrating the message, because Bernie supporters can't be, naive, and there's a lot that needs to be done, and the margins need to be bigger. And then at the same time, of course, we have to push back against the corporate press that is going to literally pretend he didn't actually win.
Yeah,
that's the sort of dual track we have to figure out.
I mean, it turned out about how I thought it would when I was like, oh, I'm watching what's happening in Iowa. It seems pretty messed up. And, the polls were looking good for New Hampshire, but you can't take anything for granted. And I went and I brought 3 people with me because I was like, every vote counts in this primary. And it turns out we were right.
Yep.
Did you see what I just sent you for later too?
Right. Talking about Bloomberg's.
We want Biden to stay in, folks.
And
well, yes. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the longer folks like Buttigieg and Klobuchar, and I'm convinced even Warren and Biden stay in, the stronger the chances are for Sanders. I'm not convinced that Warren's support, as everybody else is, that those 9 points that she got in New Hampshire, if she hadn't already bled those off to Bernie Sanders.
However, did you look at those numbers in the Politico piece? Her vote is coming from people who self-identify as liberal. She did terribly with moderates and conservatives. So the extent it's a genuine ideological thing, it would go to Sanders.
It's quite conceivable. And so, nevertheless, the idea here is to have as many of the not Sanders candidates in the race, splitting the race, and each one you would want to have an opportunity to pick up the delegates and deny their compatriots the delegates. So we'll see. But all this is going to come down. We're going to go through Nevada. I would anticipate Sanders placing in the top 2 in Nevada. I would anticipate him placing in the top 2 or 3 in South Carolina. And then it's on to Super Tuesday, where, we're still too far out to have a sense of this race changing quite considerably.
And you know what else? He needs to win by enough that the DNC can't pull any funny business at the convention.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know what that means, really, but things
that are allowed based on the rules, and possibly things that are not allowed based on the rules.
Right.
I just want to say that's why I would. I mean, first of all, this is another ridiculous media bias. Bernie said 1 million times he'll support the nominee. I want to start asking the other candidates: will you support the vote lead? Will you support the person who has the most votes, regardless of what the rules are?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to have the other candidates asked.
Yeah, I mean, the way the convention works is after the first round, it's sort of not unlike the delegate, like the Iowa.
No, I understand that, but I think we need to go whatever the technicalities are. I would be willing. We need to say, will you support who the vote lead is? That's what I think, regardless of what the rules are. One person, one vote determines the nomination.
But how do you look back on the race in 2016? At one point, right, Hillary Clinton, because she had 4 million more votes than Sanders did. At one point, probably in early spring, there was just simply not enough votes out there for him ever to have achieved more votes than her.
Sure.
And so...
what does this have to do with what I'm saying?
Well, that would argue then he should have dropped out at that point, because based upon the principle
sure, I don't, and
now,
that's let me first of all say I don't think that that's relevant, because we're talking about now. But I will say, if you want to go back into the future, but I mean, if you want to go into the past, I mean, I didn't say please drop out, Bernie, but some people were trying to get super delegates to flip for him. I never said that they should do that. I think even though the thumbs were on the scales for her, and that matters, one of the big things about the legitimacy of 2016 is that she amassed more votes than him. And as much as I loathe her, and as much as I thought that was a mistake, that was the bottom line. You better believe if Bernie Sanders had one more vote than she did in 2016, I would have been there protesting.
Of course.
So to me, it's about the actual legitimacy, and I actually think one person, one vote is the legitimacy, and that is actually part of the reason in 2016 that I didn't and Matt didn't go along with some of the Bernie arguments, because at the end of the day, for all of the BS, she had 4 million more votes. I think that matters.
And if we trust these delegates to okay, maybe they can make the decision for themselves and not pick Bernie because they think the people that put them in that position want them to pick Klobuchar or whatever, right? Well, then let's hear that. Let's elaborate that for the people who are going to continue to vote for you in these primaries, and let's hear that. I'm interested to hear their rationale for that.
Wait, say again?
If you are going to go for a candidate that isn't Bernie, go against the votes, because I think Bernie will have the most votes when all this is said and done.
I would imagine at this point. I mean, it looks like it, but assuming yes.
So if you want to support one of the candidates that isn't Bernie, basically, I want to hear the rationale for why you want to do that, and if it's because you think your supporters would want you to not throw your support behind Bernie, they should know that that's that's the assumption you're operating under as a candidate.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that when you're talking like Buttigieg and Klobuchar and Biden, to a large extent, a lot of them are voting against, in some fashion, Bernie. But I guess if you're saying that Buttigieg should come out now and say that if I get to the
I think it becomes more relevant as Bernie racks up the votes.
And you see,
we want to make sure that they're not voting against their own constituents when you look at who the superdelegates are supporting.
Well, forget the superdelegates for a moment, because I don't think. I mean, that's a separate question.
David Plouffe said the other day, if we go against, I believe it was either the delegate lead or the popular vote lead, that will cause irreparable damage to the party. And I agree.
The superdelegates.
My understanding was any scenario, I'm including superdelegates, where the person who goes into the convention leading does not become the nominee, that's going to be a serious problem.
I think that's true.
So
but there's a very big difference in my mind between, let's say you go into the convention and Pete Buttigieg has, 100,000 less votes than Bernie Sanders. And Amy Klobuchar comes in with 1 million less or 2 million less votes than Bernie Sanders. But Klobuchar throws her delegates to Pete Buttigieg. 100,000 difference. That's different in my mind than the superdelegates coming in and changing the outcome of the vote.
Well, the superdelegates, that is absolutely an escalation, of course.
Right.
That's a whole other level.
But in the scenario I'm talking about, forget the superdelegates for a moment. In terms of Amy Klobuchar,
I'm holding the position that the person with the vote and delegate lead should be the nomination. It should be the nominee, period. And that all candidates should commit to that course of action. And I feel totally comfortable with that, regardless of the technicalities and the clear difference.
It's not technicalities.
Yeah,
whatever.
Have always been
part of it. On the level that most people understand democracy.
That's what
except for what we have with electoral college,
which we have all opposed to, I thought.
Yeah,
if we're going, I'm going by my metric. If you just want to know my metric, is that in 2016, the reason that I wouldn't, I already said this, I wouldn't ride that hard on certain things because Hillary Clinton actually did have 4 million more votes. If Bernie Sanders comes in with 5,000 more votes, he should be the nominee, period. And frankly, I would,
Yeah, ask everyone if they'll commit to that. And if they won't, say why not.
They'll say, because I'm committing to the rules that when I entered the campaign that were explicit.
Okay. Go sell that to the country.
We think that's garbage.
I'm just, that's what I would say.
People will think that is garbage.
Yeah, that won't resonate
That
with
the rules
people.
say I can throw my support behind Buttigieg instead of Bernie?
Of course.
Yeah, but that's not that interesting. I want to hear them say that.
Right.
Yeah,
and also that won't resonate.
I think they could say,
people,
if you say what would be your justification for giving your delegates to the second place finisher in the second round of voting, you would say well, that's what the whole convention's for.
But what about them? That do you like that overrides Bernie's lead in votes?
You could say I think that Pete Buttigieg has a better chance of winning. And that's what the convention, that's the rules of the convention that were stated when we all entered into this campaign. Everybody knew them. They were explicit. Everybody who voted, certainly if they took the time to learn, it's not like these.
Well,
then
we
I would
know
ask
that
to
the
see
voters
some
don't
polls.
do the time to do that. So
So I mean, I
that's
can
why
just say
I would
there's
ask
no
them to
way
prove
in the
it.
summer that I'm going to be making arguments like this. I'm going to be
Well, I know.
arguing,
I'm just.
I mean, sure, no, I know that they'll say that. I don't think those things will particularly resonate with people. And I also would say, too, that in terms of reality, if you actually do that, Bernie or bust will become a real thing. And it will actually be pretty disastrous.
I agree with all that. And I think, I would be shocked if there wasn't, particularly if the vote count was, obviously larger. I mean, if it's, you're talking a couple thousand votes, it's unlikely that it would even be remotely that close. But I think that is it seems to me that's a perfectly rational thing for them to say. Now, I think people have to assess when they get in there if that's going to actually lead to a victory. I suspect that it would not. I think that you'd end up, fracturing the party and people would be pissed.
And then that gets to the other part of the question, which is what is the difference inside the party and within these people, frankly, between people who are well to the right and don't like Bernie and everything, but really do want to defeat Trump. And I think a chunk of people who are absolutely comfortable, they would certainly prefer to see Trump return to power than Bernie get anywhere near power.
Well,
and that's the other,
I think there are also, though, people who legitimately feel that Bernie Sanders is going to lose 40 states.
Well, once we get to the point, though, where it becomes very clear that if they do that, they will lose by 40 states for sure because of how many people they're pissing off. That, then we'll see. Like James Carville, I actually take it as word that at the end of the day will support Bernie Sanders because he opposed Donald Trump for all he's running his mouth. Someone like Hillary Clinton, I think in the privacy of the ballot would pick Donald Trump over Bernie Sanders.
Absolutely.
So that's the distinction I'm drawing. And I think that, there's definitely people who think to themselves, absolutely, I'd prefer Bernie Sanders to lose to Donald Trump or to alienate those people because my contracts won't get affected and I can actually spin him losing in a way that will prop my own career. And I think there's other people who are totally freaked out and at the end of the day do want to remove Trump and they'll support Bernie.
I think the most important takeaway here is we cannot get discouraged. We need to stay focused right now. If Bernie doesn't have enough delegates to win it outright, they're going to try some stuff at the convention. We cannot trust these other candidates to support the person with the most votes. Like you said, they'll have lots of arguments for why it's a fine thing to do to support the candidate with the second most votes or whatever. We need to win by enough so that this stuff cannot happen. And the way to do that right now is to keep on knocking on people's doors, sending texts, showing up, and not throwing up your hands and saying, oh, well, it's not fair. He can't win. It doesn't matter.
100%.
Right.
Also threatening people on Twitter.
Like, that's a fucking what they want you to do.
Exactly.
Get in their mentions. Stay relentless.
Oh, God. Did you guys see that SNL this past week where they portrayed Bernie as just like the head of a troll army?
What is...
No.
Just a couple more stats. Just a couple more stats. 57% of voters on Tuesday were female. That was up from 2 points in 2016. A majority of voters were college graduates, 53%. Liberal or somewhat liberal, self-described, 60%. Their three big issues were healthcare, climate change, and income inequality. A big majority supported single payer, 61%.
That's like the get rid of private insurance, like full on single payer, right? The way they worded that, I think, was pretty.
Yeah, but I mean, they
eliminate private insurance.
How do you justify supporting two candidates out of that 61%?
This is why I think it's useful for them to say why they wouldn't support Bernie when he wins all the votes.
And also why Pete lying about it might be having more of a positive effect on a broader range of voters than we think.
I wonder, has Klobuchar, maybe she didn't get any of those people. I would like to see those crosstabs on there. But, what's interesting is that when you hear those, right, they're, and I think 40% of the electorate, if I remember correctly from the stat I saw, was incomes over 100%. And, 100,000. I think it was something like 30% was 50,000 to 100,000, and 30% were under 50,000. So your PMCs, is that what they are? The
Professional managerial class?
Yeah, the PMCs apparently there's more of them than those other. I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to divvy up those things. In New Hampshire, PMCs are pretty important apparently to woo. I mean, it's surprising because when you hear those numbers, right? 57% were women. 53% college graduates, 60% liberal or somewhat liberal, healthcare, climate change, income inequality, single payer. They sound, those 100,000 plus at 40% sound like Warren voters, right? I mean, theoretically, but not last night. The percentage of young voters declined from 2016 to 2020 from 19% in 2016 to 14%.
Is that's a turnout thing, or what do you think's going on there?
I don't know. I mean, look, in 2016, it could be that there were just more older people just as a percentage, because you had, I don't know the actual raw numbers of whether, but that 5 percentage points seems high. And at the very least, younger people did not come out despite the strokes.
Oh, God. I read a really horrifying stat that made me feel so old about the strokes. Like, Julian Casablancas is the same age now that Stevie Nicks was in, what year? 1994, when Clinton used the Fleetwood Mac song as his campaign song.
Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow.
I was like, God damn it. This is about as dated as that was when I was a kid, and it seemed ancient.
That's depressing.
Part of it could be just, what we saw with Sanders last time. A lot of it was a tremendous amount of Hillary Clinton disdain. We will get a better sense of that going forward, which the only thing I can tell you is encouraging in terms of what it means for the general election. Because if we start to get the sense now, New Hampshire is got a lot of independents, and the same day registration voting, a lot of crossover voters, as they say. But so we need to see this as it drags out. But there's a sort of a paradox here. People are saying, well, Sanders doesn't have the same support. This shows that he would be weak in a general election. But what it's also showing is that Clinton was uniquely weak in a general election against a also uniquely weak candidate, Donald Trump. So, I mean, it's quite conceivable, again, that anybody would beat Donald Trump. That is, that I go back to my refrain, Martin O'Malley could have won. Would have won. And I think
he might have been able to mess it up.
Joe
Biden would have won.
Who knows? I mean, I think there's indication that the desire for people to go out and vote against Hillary Clinton quite high. The other thing that I think we have to keep in mind is that Bernie Sanders in 2020 is not necessarily Bernie Sanders in 2016. He has had a heart attack. He is 4 years older. Those 4 years are a pretty long 4 years in when you get to be that age. You look at a guy like Biden whose decline was precipitous over the past 4 years. So that could have a lot to do with it too. So there's a lot of factors.
He needs a healthy young running mate like Nina Turner.
He needs to do the stuff that I think also Namiki and I were talking about, which is just recalibrating also and making sure you're hitting the rural, hitting the older, getting some vets up there, getting some small business owners up there.
I gotta say, trying to canvass in rural areas in the wintertime, I see why maybe people don't do it enough. It's really hard. There's a lot of ice out there.
Yeah, it was snowy up there.
A lot of people want you to stay off their property.
Particularly up there.
It's live PMC or die up there.
All right, so let's just touch on this other sort of massive story that I think is brewing that, probably happened on that primary day for a reason. So there were career prosecutors who were handling the case against Roger Stone and U.S. Attorney's Office. They were charging Roger Stone with lying to Congress, obstruction of justice. And they had recommended, based upon what I understand, it was a recommendation by, I guess, a parole board, 7 to 9 years prison. Now, that's a lot, but I also, my understanding is that it's indicative of them feeling that he has some very important information about the president that they want to put a squeeze on him to get him to talk about. Donald Trump tweeted out, "This is a horrible and very unfair situation. The real crimes were on the other side." As nothing happens to them. Cannot allow this miscarriage of justice. Hours after that tweet, Bill Barr reversed the recommendation, or announced that they would reverse the recommendation, change the recommendation. One by one, 4 of the top career prosecutors on this team, 2 of whom had worked in Robert Mueller's investigation, filed notices with the court. They did this one by one, so they clearly sort of coordinated this to leave the case. One of them actually quit the DOJ entirely. They would not give a reason. It was clearly a protest. Jonathan Kravis was one of the prosecutors, wrote in a court filing that he had resigned as assistant U.S. attorney, leaving the government altogether. 3 others, Aaron Zielinski, Adam Jed, and Michael Mirando, filed notices with the judge saying, please notice the withdrawal from the case. Zielinski was one of the people who were on Robert Mueller's team, also indicating in filing he was quitting his special assignment to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the district, but he will remain an assistant at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Baltimore. Meanwhile, Donald Trump also withdrew the nomination of a former U.S. attorney, Jesse Liu, to serve as the Treasury Department Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes, right? They track terrorist money. And supposedly she was pulled because a conservative advisor to Trump, Ledeen, I don't know if she was married to that same Ledeen from back in the neocon days, was upset because Liu had a role in the sentencing of Flynn. And they were unhappy with the pressure that was on Michael Flynn. So basically what we're watching is a complete corruption of the Department of Justice. A complete corruption. And incidentally, Ledeen was noted in the Mueller report as providing updates to Flynn. She supposedly also claimed to have obtained a trove of emails from the dark web that were supposedly the 30,000 missing Clinton emails. So she was knee deep in this. So there's a lot of really strange stuff that's going down. My understanding is that the House is waiting for people to call in and ask for hearings on this. There should be hearings. If these were the Republicans, there'd be hearings about Bill Barr like 30 seconds after that announcement. They should have already been impeaching him. So call your congresspeople, call your senators, but particularly call your congresspeople and say, I want hearings on what Bill Barr just did. That's all you need to say. It's messed up. It's really messed up. Bill Barr is a very dangerous man. Very dangerous. I'm frankly a little bit shocked we don't hear more about it, but there's a certain amount of fatigue, I think, and lack of understanding of just how sort of nuts this is. We're going to take a break. We're going to head into the fun half. We have some more clips about Michael Bloomberg and obviously Donald Trump and what's it? Oh yeah. Let's tell you. This is Trump responding to the Roger Stone recommendations, and they're pulling. Which clip number is this? It says he has a right to do it. Okay, yeah, here it is.
I thought it was ridiculous that if that's no, I didn't speak to the judge. I'd be able to do it if I wanted. I have the absolute right to do it. I stay out of things to a degree that people wouldn't believe, but I didn't speak to him. I thought the recommendation was ridiculous. I thought the whole prosecution was ridiculous. And I look at others that haven't been prosecuted, or I don't know where it is now. But when you see that, I thought it was an insult to our country, and it shouldn't happen. And we'll see what goes on there. But that was a horrible aberration. These are the same Mueller people that put everybody through hell, and I think it's a disgrace. No, I have not been involved with it at all.
In other words, he's been totally involved in it, and him putting out that tweet he knew was going to signal to his people. Right? I mean, he doesn't have to like back channel this. He does it in public. That's the way he does it. And then they know what is expected of them.
It's kind of smart in a dumb way.
Yeah, it's almost like criminally smart. It's almost like he's got a good criminal mind.
A certain low cunning.
Yeah.
What?
Folks, a reminder, this program relies on
I stay out of crime like you wouldn't believe.
I didn't say a word. I could have. That's his trick.
It's called tactics.
That's his trick, too. He always says, like, I didn't do this, but in the event that it's proven that I did do it, I could do it. And I mean, that's the whole thing with the entire impeachment argument, too, right? Like, I didn't do it, but I could have. Even if I did, it was fine. That was actually what a lot of the Republican senators claimed was why they exonerated him.
He learned.
So why are you saying you didn't do it?
He learned his lesson.
Could have done it.
He could have done it, but he didn't. And
Folks,
now he learned.
I believe that the president has learned.
Folks, you should know that you could become a member of the Majority Report. You didn't, but you could if you wanted to. Go to jointhemajority.com. You go there and become a member. You will get extra content every day. You will support the free show. You will get the free show without commercials. Many, many benefits to becoming a member and just feeling like you're one of the members. Also, amquickie.com. We had a 10% bump in listenership over the past 3 weeks. Undoubtedly a function of our new tweaks. People are loving the show. It's out every day before 8 a.m. amquickie.com. You can sign up there or wherever you find your podcasts, completely free. And you can also listen to it on the app. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. We had Noma Key Const on the show last night, and she has a new show, The Nomiki Show, and you can find that at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show, Nomiki show. Michael, speaking of shows, tonight is not Tuesday, but it is.
But TMBS is here.
Tuesday.
Not a moment too soon with Crystal Ball and Malika Jabali. I will just say real quick, next week while we're on vacation, we will have new interviews with Adolph Reed Jr. Aaron Bastani will be making his first appearance on the show.
Cool.
And a bunch of other content. Last Sunday, the episode with Paul O'Connell, who's a law professor and labor organizer, on finally learning the lessons of Brexit in the UK, I think has a lot of strategic lessons for the left internationally. And of course, we'll be talking about Sinn Féin doing very well in Ireland. All that and more. Get your tickets. There's a link in Majority Report blog post for April 3rd at the North Door in Austin, Texas. TMBS Live with Abby Martin and Anna Kasparian. TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS to get the whole thing.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we have an episode of Prolit Cult, AP Andy's side project about space, sci-fi, the paranormal, and the parapolitical, in which he speaks with Joseph Flatley, the investigative journalist behind the So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh podcast. They talk about all kinds of cool, interesting UFO things, including a small UFO apocalypse cult in the desert of Tucson, started by a man named Gabriel of Arantia. And it's crazy, folks. Check it out. Patreon.com/The Antifada. Also, last week, we had a very good episode, if I do say so myself, on political economy. Sean goes deep. So if you want to understand why capitalism is going to end, weighted down by the weight of its own internal contradictions, listen to that episode. It's really good. Patreon.com/The Antifada.
Matt.
Literary hangover. I did The History of Colonel Nathaniel Bacon's Rebellion by Ebenezer Cook, a 1728 poem about Nathaniel Bacon's rebellion. We talk about, among other things, how George Washington's great-grandfather committed a war crime only a couple years after arriving in the States.
See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabs.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if we're going to take calls today, but we will take IMs. Just changing it up a little bit. Still paying off all the calls that we had last night. We had people on the hold. 89 calls, I think, was the top we had, or 75 or something. That callers holding at one time.
Start making people call us collect.
No kidding. Can you still do that? I don't even like.
I don't know. I've never done that in my life. I just remember the commercials when I was
That used to be the way it was. Yeah.
Dial down the center.
Bravo-matic. Fun fact. Pete Buttigieg, younger than Tom Brady. Is that possible?
I mean, that makes sense to me. Tom Brady's old as hell.
Oh, take it easy. Take it easy, buddy. Hey, let's check in with our old friend Jordan Peterson. Now, I've been wondering why Dave Rubin has been feeling so shy and lost the past couple of days. Now, this is I want to be careful here because I don't want to I know people who have been addicted to benzos. People get prescribed Ativan all the time for anxiety and whatnot. And as far as I can tell, doctors who prescribe this do not seem to, or not all of them, maybe not even the majority, I don't know, but a significant number of them don't seem to understand how people get addicted to these type of benzos. Ativan has such a short half-life that you can actually take it at night and suffer withdrawal symptoms by the end of the next day and not be aware that you're actually suffering those withdrawal symptoms. And doctors don't seem to understand that the research indicates that it's not the amount that you take that is the key determining factor as to whether you get addicted or not, but the length of time in which you've been prescribed it. And it's very difficult for people to get off this. I know people who were addicted to opioids and to benzos, and they said the benzos were harder to get over.
Benzo withdrawal can actually kill you, I think. It's
brutal, and it can take an extraordinary amount of time. And I think there's, because there doesn't seem to be a full sort of understanding about this, and the sort of like titrating off these things is, apparently seems to be, a narrowly understood. There's a lot of controversy on how you treat these people. With that said, there's something very strange going on with Jordan Peterson. There's only two things that we know or have given us knowledge about what's going on. One was a story in the National Post, I think it is, the paper in Canada, which Peterson is a columnist. He is closely aligned with that paper. They have been promoting him, who is a best-selling author, for years. And they wrote a piece that basically was based upon this update by, is it Michaela Peterson, his daughter. This is the woman who is a supposed health diet writer saying that you should eat exclusively meat in your diet.
I heard that maybe, and he did not mean this in at all an offensive way, that when the great Zizek met her, when he was meeting the whole Peterson clan, he went, "Ah, yes, the beef girl."
Right. And
love it.
But they report that, well, let's listen to what she says here. And the weird thing about the National Post is it's a newspaper. They have reporters, and they seem to have just taken at face value this story that she relates here. Here it is. This is an update that she gave just a week ago or so, less, 5 days ago.
Hi, everyone. It's been months since we've given an update on Jordan or my family's health, and it's time for one, so here it is. The last year has been extremely difficult for our family. Dad was put on a low dose of a benzodiazepine a few years ago for anxiety following an extremely severe autoimmune reaction to food. He took the medication as prescribed. Last April, when my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, the dose of the medication was increased. It became apparent that he was suffering from both a physical dependency and a paradoxical reaction to the medication. A paradoxical reaction means the drugs do the opposite of what they're supposed to. These reactions are rare but not unheard of.
Pause. That is true. There are occasions where actually the benzos can actually increase your anxiety, and in fact, part of that is, again, depending on what it was, the half-life can be so short that you're suffering withdrawal by the end of a 24-hour or 20-hour period, and so anxiety can actually shoot up. Continue.
For the last 8 months, he's been in unbearable discomfort from this drug, made worse when trying to remove it because of the addition of withdrawal symptoms stemming from physical dependence. He experienced terrible akathisia, which is a condition where the person feels an incredible, endless, irresistible restlessness bordering on panic and an inability to sit still. The reaction made him suicidal. After several failed treatment attempts in North American hospitals, including attempts at tapering and micro-tapering, we had to seek an emergency medical benzodiazepine detox, which we were only able to find in Russia. It was incredibly grueling and was further complicated by severe pneumonia, which we've been told he developed in one of the previous hospitals. He's had to spend 4 weeks in the ICU in terrible shape, but with the help of some extremely competent and courageous doctors, he survived. The decision to bring him to Russia was made in extreme desperation when we couldn't find any better option. The uncertainty around his recovery has been one of the most difficult and scary experiences we've ever had. So, finally, Dad is on the mend, even though there's a lot of physiological damage that he needs to recover from. He's improving and is off of the horrible medication. His sense of humor is back. He's smiling again for the first time in months, but he still has a long way to go to recover fully. It appears that we're going to get through this by the skin of our teeth. So let me make a couple of things clear.
Very humorous guy.
Neither our family nor the doctors here believe that this is a case of psychological addiction. Benzodiazepine physical dependence due to brain changes can occur in a matter of weeks. It can be made even worse by paradoxical reactions that are difficult to diagnose and can be extremely dangerous. We've been told and hope that Dad will recover fully, but it will take time and he still has a ways to go. We're extremely lucky and grateful that he's alive. The next update will come from him directly. Thanks again for all the support.
So there's a lot of things. So the first piece was written on February 8th in the National Post. It says, it goes on to say, let's see, where do we have here? That apparently in this piece, well, I can't find the other one here, that apparently it goes through basically what she said. For the last 6 months, he's been a horrible, unbearable. Okay. He's still taking, and this is a piece that was written by her, I guess. I can't quite make it out. It doesn't seem to be, this is a February 7th, 2020 post. The doctors have, if you scroll down here, it says it's written by her, I guess, or maybe this is, but
in the video and script given to the National Post,
right, and which seems to be like a little bit weird.
TMBS
the whole thing is weird.
He has neurological, he's smiling again for the first time. He has a long way to go to recover. He spent 4 weeks in the ICU. He has neurological damage from the benzos, which is hopefully temporary. He's still taking anti-seizure medication.
Molly Percocet.
Now, wait a second. She's saying like he's doing great, but he can't type or walk steadily yet. Still, this is a vast and rapid improvement.
I still look askance at the statement that he was having a severe reaction to food. It just seems so weird.
Can I just say one point that's serious?
Was it the apples?
Hold on for one second. The whole point is a lot of this stuff is hard to believe. And they're a newspaper. They should report this stuff out before they just print it out there. It seems a little bit weird to sort of like we're just going to literally regurgitate a press statement for a celebrity.
A YouTube video.
I think that's also, my speculation here, and I will really try to not make light of this type of addiction that he's going through because it's really horrible. But it just seems to me that my projection is that because of his whole brand and the stories they tell people, they can't just sort of own an addiction issue. Like they're acknowledging it, but they're doing all of these bizarre evasions, and it has to be the super special thing, and Russia and this and that, versus like, hey, it doesn't invalidate my dad. You know, if you had a proper perspective, my dad's a brilliant man. He does this important work. We love him. He's also an addict. A lot of people are addicts. A lot of people deal with addiction, and it isn't this big, special, mysterious thing.
Well,
so that's a separate point. I totally agree with you that the paper should not uncritically report it, but the perception that I'm getting here is that these are people trapped by their own narrative because they can't just say it's a struggle. A lot of people have, and he's dealing with it.
How do you know he has an addiction?
She's refusing to acknowledge the mental health aspect of addiction here in a way that plays respectability politics with it that is very unhelpful, right? Like I'm not like all those other addicts who had a mental health element to it. This is purely physical.
That's what I'm hearing.
How do we know it's an addiction? How do we know any of this is accurate? The guy has just disappeared. We take it on an article of faith that he had in a
Dad, I'm going to go on YouTube in a bikini and announce you're dead. Get ready for it. I'm taking over the meat business.
I'm like Dave.
Your time is done, Dad. And then I'm announcing my own world tour with a Tulsi-style workout video.
I mean, on some
you'll
level,
shut your goddamn mouth.
I mean, on one hand, like, okay, they can announce whatever they want to announce. But the National Post has an obligation, if they're going to promote these people, to actually do some firsthand reporting on their part, and in some way sort of say, like, wait a second, is he incapable of walking and talking? Is he? How did that happen from the benzo? Was that a function of the withdrawal? He was put into Was he put into some type of induced coma? Like, what is going on here?
That'll keep the testosterone flowing.
And yes, I think they're definitely trying to protect some type of image, but we have no idea, like, was he really addicted to benzos? Maybe he was addicted to something else.
We're following a weekend at Bernie's strategy until I can ramp up my own business empire. Hi, I'm Michaela Peterson. Would you like morality lessons, but in a bikini? Well, good luck, because my dad's dead after a prolonged struggle with some gender-fluid students who killed him. I'm reporting it all in a YouTube video now.
I mean,
if I had to guess, I'd say that he is in rehab for Klonopin, and that is a fact that they could not keep from getting out. And they used that they built a whole meta narrative around it.
They're afraid people are going to leak it from his hospital in Russia?
If that's there was where he is.
There was
that's
one.
I mean.
No, I think it was actually the original thing that came out said that he was at some type of facility, I think in New York. I believe them. I take it at face. I believe that he has an addiction, and I think it's really serious and really terrible, and it's horrible. He is part of a very large scale problem in our society, and it's really terrible. And I think that there is some, there's plenty of examples of people who can't. I mean, look, he was a major, I would say a much, much, much bigger monster than Jordan Peterson. But the guy who founded Scientology, you read about him. I'm forgetting L. Ron Hubbard. There were certain things where it was like this guy was having like things that really needed to be taken care of. They were not figments of his imagination. Well, they were, but like they were real problems, and he couldn't do it because his whole brand and game was built around not.
Well,
and I think there's some of the same dynamic.
This guy is a clinical psychologist too. Like, think about that for a second. If he really wanted to help people, he would tell the truth and say, I'm only human. This is a problem that affects a lot of people. Let's talk about it in a real way.
Yeah, that's maybe he can't talk. I mean, that's the thing. We just don't know.
Yeah, maybe he will. Maybe he will later. I mean, hope springs eternal.
I just think that a newspaper should not be used as sort of some type of like conduit to present.
Michaela's got a new bikini and a new update on her dad's health. Let's go to press.
Boom. We've got to keep up the YouTube business.
Exactly.
So,
Michaela, even if I can't say anything else and I have spiders coming out of my veins, put on a tank top and talk about personal responsibility.
all right, let's get back to the 2020 election. Mike Bloomberg yesterday, realizing that, people are aware of apparently those video cameras and those audio recorders were actually running when I was speaking couple years ago, when I was bragging about how we would throw 16 to 25-year-old black men up against the wall. It's a way to protect everybody.
Xerox a description.
Xerox a description.
He literally said that.
And we played the audio. I think it was yesterday. Yesterday, after that audio it wasn't leaked. It was apparently just sitting on YouTube, but nobody had bothered to look for it. Ben Dixon started to send it around. Mike Bloomberg tweeted out, "I have apologized for taking too long to understand the impact of stop and frisk on Black and Latino communities. I inherited stop and frisk. In an effort to stop gun violence, it was overused. I cut it back by 95%. I should have cut it back sooner." Let's just look at that, exactly what he's talking about there. He did inherit stop and frisk. And when he did, it was 100,000 stops a year in 2002. Then in 2003, he ramped it up to 160,000 stops. That is a 160% increase. Then in 2004, he ramped it up to 313,000. That is a 300% increase in 2 years. Then it was 352. By 2006, it was 500,000. That's a 500% increase. Contemplate this for a moment. There are 365 days in the year. For there to be 506,000 stops in a year, you're talking over 1,000 stops and frisks a day. No Sundays off, no Christmas, no Thanksgiving. Every day, over 1,000 people stopped and frisked. That was maintained in 2007, 472. Then back up in 2008, 540,000. In 2009, 580,000. 2010, 600,000. By 2011, there were over 2,000 stop and frisks every day. Now, we know where these were taking place. Probably within a mile or two radius. Think about this. We're talking maybe a mile or two square miles. 2,000 a day, more than that. But we were led to believe by Michael Bloomberg, as he recalled this after the time that he supposedly ramped it down in 2013 to 190,000. That was incidentally after a court case that said, stop it. Now, in 2014 and 15, when he's looking back on this, because remember now, he's telling us that he ramped it down because he realized at one point it was a problem. But in 2015, well after he was outside of the mayor's office, he's still justifying it by saying, this is where the guns were. We did this. We wanted to catch the guns. In 2011, when there were over 2,000 stop and frisks a day, if you had a kid who was 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, I have a 14-year-old daughter. A lot of her friends come over, 15-year-old boys. The idea that when they walked out of my apartment, because they've come to visit my daughter, that there is an extraordinary chance that they're going to get stopped, thrown up against the wall by a cop, because there's 2,000 a day. 2,000 a day. There's no chance over the course of a month that one of these kids doesn't come over and say, I got stopped. No chance. Zero chance. How many guns did they find to justify throwing these kids up against the wall? 819 in 2011. Not 819,000. Not 8,190. 819. Bring up a calculator. That's less than half the number of stops that they would do on a single day. So what do I do? 819 divided by 685,724? And that's going to give me, right? I think you go divided by. All right, this is a bad calculator. What kind of calculator is this? Where'd you get that calculator? There's one on your computer. What are you doing? Are you getting me a mortgage or something? Divided by 685,724. No, 724. 0.00, so we're talking 0.01%. Not 1%, 0.01%.
Yeah, that's like a 100th of a gun per stop. A thousandth of a gun per stop.
That's just nuts. That's just nuts.
I want them to live.
In 2013, they found 400 guns with almost 200,000 stops. I mean,
well, it's not like the policy has downsides for the people being stopped.
I just think of the lack of ability to see these kids as human beings. That is the one theme that runs through everything that Bloomberg says and does, even stuff that I would agree with, like cutting down on sugary drinks.
And not just human beings, children.
Yeah, I mean, these are the idea that you got to go through life like that and perceive yourself to be criminal simply because of the way that you look.
Get to 6A.
Well, it was a part of a larger policy to cleanse Black and brown working class people from the city so that wealthy developers could come in and make a ton of money.
Yep.
And it worked pretty well.
The Trumpification of New York City. Jamal Bowman is running for Congress against Elliot Engel in New York's 16th district. I interviewed him some time ago on Ring of Fire Radio. I think it's up on our YouTube channel. Really, really incredible guy, an educator, has done some amazing stuff, I think, up in the Bronx. He tweeted out yesterday, one day driving home from school, I was pulled over by the cops, taken out of my car, handcuffed, placed in the back of a police car, then released without explanation. Bloomberg has not shown he understands the pain he caused in our community at all. At all. The man perceives, I think, people in general as being, I would say subhuman, but I think he just thinks he's a deity. Let's play this clip again. Just, you need to listen to this. But I also do think that he harbors a particular disregard for people of color, particularly Black people. To state what he states here in this interview at WR in 2013. And again, he was saying this stuff as late as 2015 that we know of in public.
They just keep saying, oh, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
First off, he has no idea what he's talking about with these proportions. I don't have the data right in front of me, but I mean, he was claiming like 95% of all murders were committed by Black people or something to that effect. Total disregard for the human beings that he deals with. On top of which, speaking of of supporting people with total disregard. In 2014, Mike Bloomberg spent $3 million. $3 million. And that's chump change to him. Still a lot of money in my book. To Governor Rick Snyder, his reelection campaign. Rick Snyder was, of course, the governor of Michigan when they basically stripped huge swaths of the Michigan population, and not uncoincidentally, black people, of essentially their democracy, where their elected leaders had no control over their cities, particularly cities. And one of the things that Rick Snyder did, if you are forgetting, this is in addition, he also signed that right to work legislation in 2012, destroying as a direct attack on unions. He also was, in 2014, went on to basically poison thousands of children in Flint, Michigan. He poisoned 100,000 people. But in terms of the damage it did, you have in Michigan now, the number of children who have special needs has shot up since 2012 by something like 56% because they have lead poisoning, neurological poisoning, heavy metals. He poisoned these people, and not necessarily intentionally, but because he stripped the power, essentially, of elected leaders, he denied the ability of these people who knew they were being poisoned, the ability to make it stop. People complained, there's something wrong with our water. They had it tested. There's lead in our water. But there's no elected officials. There's only people appointed by Rick Snyder who are in charge of this. And they didn't need to respond because their boss was not the people who were complaining about being poisoned. Their boss was Rick Snyder, whose reelection was, at least in part, a function of Michael Bloomberg. 1 in 5 students in Flint's public schools are now eligible for special education. This was actually almost a year ago. It's probably gone up a little bit. 56%, the number of Flint students with special needs has gone up. That's what happens when you poison toddlers with lead. And I don't know if there's anything more apt than Michael Bloomberg sharing that same sort of like notion with Rick Snyder of like, look, we know best what to do for these people. And if they complain about it, we're not going to listen. Period. The idea that Michael Bloomberg is electable, because I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, Bloomberg, I think he can win. The idea that he's electable, when the Democratic Party, I mean, first of all, no one should vote for Michael Bloomberg. No one should vote for Michael Bloomberg. But the idea that you're going to have the black community vote for Michael Bloomberg as if they will not hear about this or they don't already know about Michael Bloomberg's history is almost as offensive, not quite, as Michael Bloomberg's perspective on this. I mean, this guy, the total disregard is stunning. On top of which, you know, for all the things that the federal government did in terms of spying on Muslims in the wake of 9/11, Michael Bloomberg oversaw the CIA moving into the New York City Police Department. They literally got a guy from the CIA who came in. He no longer then worked for the CIA because that's illegal. Came in, set up basically their own little mini intelligence unit. And he then deployed the New York Police Department to spy on Muslim student groups, on mosques, wherever Muslims were, he was sending in spies. It did not generate a single terrorist lead. Not a single terrorist lead. And here is...
That one's harder to plug into the calculator. Zero divided by...
Zero divided by whatever they spied on people. Yet, he defends it.
Obligation to do so, and it is to protect the very things that let Yale survive.
Back to the Muslim students organizations, the most recent report said not only they were looking at public websites, but also accompanying students on whitewater rafting trips.
I have no idea. The only whitewater rafting I've done, I did with my daughter. I don't think she had a lot of information that I was interested in terms of her political views. It was a long time
Pause
ago.
it. Let me explain to you what's going on here. Bloomberg is making light of the fact that the New York City Police Department put spies into youth groups who would go on a whitewater rafting trip to assess whether they were terrorists. And his response is, I've been on some whitewater rafting trips with my daughter, and she had no information.
Let me guess, it would be much more interesting to hear for some Al-Qaeda kid to listen to my daughter go on and on and on.
And why are we letting Muslim people go on whitewater rafting trips in the first place?
I thought you were from the desert. Why do you want to be in the whitewater? It doesn't make any sense. They're more likely to tip over and drown. I care about their lives.
They're not called brown water rafting trips, now are they?
Those were Navy SEALs, and they were there for their safety.
That's a lot of information that I was interested in terms of her political views. It was a long time ago. I'm not sure at that time she had political views. She certainly does now.
Do you think that type of activity goes one step too far?
No. We have to keep this country safe. This is a dangerous place. Make no mistake about it. It's very cute to go and to blame everybody and say we should stay away from anything that smacks of intelligence gathering. The job of our law enforcement is to make sure that they prevent things, and you only do that by being proactive. You have to respect people's right to privacy. You have to obey the law. And
unless they're
Muslim,
Muslim,
across this country,
and then you don't have
state
to.
level and city level.
Listen, just contemplate this, all right? We have federal agents who befriend Michael Bloomberg's daughter and head over to his house and travel around with her. Maybe date her. We have embedded someone in the Bloomberg family because, look, we've got to know if they're up to some criminal bad doing.
Indeed.
I mean...
Taking notes, Bernie transition team?
Exactly. Right? Just contemplate what he's suggesting here. Yeah, this is full-on pre-crime stuff.
Well, in that it's cute. That you would respect the constitutional rights and protections. The rhetoric that's like, oh, well, why don't you just give every Muslim in the city a candy bar? It's like, no, you're saying to not invasively, illegally spy on them, deploy CIA tactics on college students who do, who pray and do community events together.
It's unbelievable. Michael Bloomberg is not electable.
And by the way,
this is just tip of the iceberg.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, and I think again, this is what is so frustrating about the split response to Trump. I think people are taking more seriously how dangerous it is the way he with Barr and so on. But people are still, I think, not enough people are taking seriously the strategic acumen. If Mike Bloomberg is the nominee, Donald Trump is going to run to the left of him on criminal justice issues. and he's going to destroy him. And he absolutely will get that couple of percentage points that they are looking to either stay home or flip to Trump. There's no doubt.
And with 95% approval rating for Donald Trump from Republicans, the idea that somehow Mike Bloomberg is going to bring in this whole new crowd of people in the suburbs of Wisconsin or Michigan, I think you're dreaming.
How'd that work the last time around?
Exactly.
The one person that could be even worse at holding that coalition together than Hillary Clinton. And for the money obsessed, it all goes away in a general election. You think Trump and the Republicans can't amass a war chest to go up against this guy's?
Well, Hillary had much more money than Trump in the last election.
Exactly. And Trump will have more this time.
And he's the president.
And he's the frigging president.
Like, so what kind of earned media think he can get as president doing this stuff?
And like the Clintons also had a terrible record on racial justice, but at the same time, they built relationships with black community leaders in such a way that they were able to get many people of color to vote for them. And Bloomberg hasn't done that.
Bloomberg's doing that. I mean, Bloomberg's throwing the money around. He just has the fourth member of the Congressional Black Caucus endorse him. And I liked that Malika Jabali, I'm going to paraphrase, she was like, look, on one hand, this is obviously ridiculous. And then on the other, it speaks to, how cash starved, frankly, a fair amount of institutions are. But
maybe it's not that different than what the Clintons did.
No, it's super similar. The difference is that the Clintons had a decades-long process and had some actual political credibility. But it's incredibly similar. But
in this case, people have a real choice. Like, I feel like with the Clintons, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Vote for a Republican? At this point in the process, people have a real choice and they can vote for someone who doesn't have a horrible record on racial justice.
He's cleaning up with low information voters. I mean, that's just the reality. He's got a huge war chest, and the states where and that's why you want him to debate.
That's why I want him to debate.
I mean, whatever way you do it, you just simply need to. I do think sunlight's the best disinfectant here.
And I think when we talk about sunlight being the best disinfectant, I think that's why Mark Levin is out there talking about Bernie Sanders. Here's Mark Levin. This guy's a lunatic. You may not know him for talk radio. I've listened to him many years. In fact, back in the day when the original Majority Report was on 7 to 10 and then 6 to 9 on New York radio, we would consistently beat Mark Levin's ratings. And then managed to not be able to monetize that because of the radio rejects that we had on staff who were selling the ads. Nevertheless, here's Mark Levin. He is a true American. You know this because he has a flag behind him and pictures behind him.
Jefferson and Lincoln.
Jefferson. And is that Lincoln back there?
Yep.
Can't quite tell because of the lighting. And here he is. And then there's two pictures. There's who's the little kids? He's got his kids there, I guess, on the desk. Here he is talking about Bernie Sanders. See how this resonates.
So all he's about are radical, statist, Marxist ideas. This man has never gotten dirt under his fingernails. This man has never lied down
Pause
under
it for
a car.
1 second. Pause it for 1 second as we look at Mark Levin and he talks about getting dirt under his fingernails.
Manual labor, Mark. Over
yes, here we go. Here he's about to talk about how he's never gotten underneath a car.
Fingernails. This man has never lied down under a car to look at the bottom of the car to change the oil. This man, to the best of my knowledge, never changed a tire. I know he's never done an operation. I know he's never taken blood. I don't know how he can run hospitals. He doesn't know enough about hospitals, but he knows everything. He says he knows everything. And it should tell you something also. This is a man born in Brooklyn, New York. Where does he wind up? In Vermont. He talks about this society being racist from the top to the bottom. Racist throughout. Why did he choose Vermont? Why does he live in Vermont? Why didn't he choose another place? Why didn't he choose a town like Newark or Camden or East Palo Alto or East St. Louis? Why didn't he pick any of these really tough minority towns? Why didn't he pick them? Because he's racist from top to bottom.
Has this guy been to Park
Do
Slope
you
lately?
notice how he pivots from trying to you know, and this will be an MSNBC talking point soon enough, but he can't help himself. Like, he can't just do a clean, like, why didn't Bernie move there? Because he doesn't want to be around people of color. And incidentally, those places are super dangerous. And he wasn't willing to take that risk of living around these people because he's racist. He can't even hold his own racism in enough for 30 seconds to do the clean, disingenuous point.
But what I'm struck by that is how he is within like 90 seconds. Like, this is so clearly an attempt to figure out what's going to stick, and not even necessarily with his audience, but like even just like what's going to sound to make sense in his own head. And he's having to dance around so much because he moves from this guy has never changed the oil on his car to the best of my knowledge, he's never changed a tire. First of all, I've worked with everybody in this room, like combined, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, 15 years. I have no idea if anybody in this room has changed the tire. I don't know how Mark Levin would have a sense of whether Bernie Sanders has ever changed the tire.
Oh, you can tell.
Yeah. But the fun thing
was a carpenter. You know?
The funny part is like so there he's trying to say this guy is an egghead who lives in rural Vermont. Wait a second. Okay, no, hold on. He's not an egghead. He's a racist because he lives in rural Vermont. And we know racists never look at their underneath of their cars to change oil.
Not at all. They live in Newark and they don't change their own oil.
Wait a second. I need to.
And they know everything. You remember Bernie's infamous "I know absolutely everything" address?
Yes.
Said, I've never changed a tire, but I know how to do it because I literally know everything.
I'm like Ken Jennings.
The pivot from this is a guy who's never
Fucking
changed.
Stephen Hawking over here.
He's never changed the oil in his car, nor has he ever performed surgery. And so therefore he should not be able to figure out how we run national health insurance.
No, national health insurance happens when the senators take the blood themselves. That's how they do it in England.
And he should also, this proposal where he would nationalize oil changes, that is also messed up. This is the dilemma they have, because you look back, at least, you know, with Obama, they could say like he is a secret Muslim because his name was, you know, it was a little bit easier for them. Barack Hussein Obama, Bill Ayers, you know, they're like the narrative was coherent in some fashion. And they were helped, of course, by the fact that because he was black, he necessarily had a secret agenda to, kill all whiteys. You know, and then you get stuff like there's actually a whitey tape out there. And, the hard part they will have with Bernie Sanders is coming up with a unique narrative for their voters, but even more trouble, they will have trouble coming up with a unique narrative to suppress the vote on the Democratic side. Like, you know, the idea of like, why did he go to Vermont? He must be a racist. I just like, I good luck with that one.
That was an interesting Mark Levin, who's like taking a break from Breitbart programming to say that I would never move.
Well,
to
that's the thing
Vermont.
is that like, what, you know, the idea with that is they want to put that out there and then have it picked up.
They want Joy Reid to run with it.
Exactly. Yeah. But the once you get out of the primary, the way that these things get communicated don't work in the same way. There's not going to be, I don't think, like the people who would carry this message. You think about people who really sort of like carried a lot of these right-wing messages. And I'm specifically thinking about like the Clinton cash narrative that came out of Steve Bannon's shop, essentially. And then was, laundered through the New York Times. The people who carried that message ostensibly on the left are just simply not going to carry the message that if you go to Vermont, you're racist. It's just not, it just doesn't work as well. They're not going to carry the he's an egghead message, or that he's never changed the oil in his car. I mean, first of all, this is not 1950. People tend not to change the oil in their car at the same rates that they used to. Right?
I don't think Mark Levin's probably got on the ground and laid under his car to change the oil
No.
either.
First of all, that's a really rough way of doing it. You can now get those things that will actually siphon the oil out of the dipstick thing.
He goes
Good
to
to
Pep
know.
Boys or something.
You could get Pep Boys. That's you got to go to Napa.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
It's been a while for me.
They need to get their story straight. I've seen other right wingers saying like, "Oh, Bernie Sanders is a bum who wants your money. He was poor. He had credit card debt," as if that would not make him relatable to most people.
Right.
I was an absentee. I got into anti-war activism because I didn't want to have to go to my kids' ball games. They were so boring.
Let's put up.
Sorry, son. Gotta go to an anti-nuke protest. And incidentally, Dad's going to be pretty light on the allowance for about the next 18 months. Better become mayor of Burlington so I get health care.
We neglected to play this clip earlier, and it is important that we give Bloomberg's perspective on this stop and frisk affair shake. This is clip number 7, because he is not without defenders, and I want to be clear about this, because it would be unfair if I did not suggest that there weren't defenders of stop and frisk.
Locking in the Democratic primary.
Here we go. Here is Ben Shapiro, who will explain to all of you why stop and frisk, a policy which at its height had over 2,000 stop and frisks a day in probably what amounted to a 1 square mile area. The predominant amount of those took place there, undoubtedly. And came up with about 800 guns over the year. 2,000 a day for a year, stop and frisks. More than 2,000, actually. And coming up with 819 guns. And here's Ben Shapiro to explain to you why that's not racist.
That is 100% true. He's getting ripped up for this, right? How could he say this? What he just said on a factual basis is 100% true. On the basis of crime statistics, if you were just to compare crime reports to numbers of stops and frisks, what you see is that black and Hispanic suspects are being pulled over less frequently than they are charged in terms of the in terms of the general crime statistics. So Bloomberg's getting ripped up and down, and presumably Bloomberg is going to come out and apologize. Now, if he had any stones, Bloomberg would say, listen, my policies helped save literally thousands of black and Hispanic lives in New York City. Proactive policing saves lives. If you want to lower crime rates, and that disproportionately affects people who are living in minority communities, which are high crime areas, if you want to increase the economic growth in those areas, you need more policing, not less. And this is why I've been very much questioning the criminal justice reform proposals of the Trump administration. I'm not sure that letting more criminals out onto the streets is a solution to the investment and growth problems in minority areas of the country. Right? The going concern has been that there are too many black men in prison, that if they go back, they're going to go back to their kids, they're going to go back to their girlfriends or spouses, they're going to form nuclear families, they're going to be part of the rebuilding of the social fabric in these areas. That may be true for some, but a lot of these people are going to be recidivists, and then they're going to increase the crime rates in these particular communities. The fact is, one of the great miraculous stories of the last half century in the United States is the lowering crime rate between 1994 and 2015. To blow that on the basis of political correctness seems weird to me. And
you know, he's almost there. Like, he gets like there's been a miraculous drop in crime that started in 1994. Thereabouts, actually started a little bit earlier than that, which was, coincidentally, 22 years after broadly, I mean, more or less, certain areas, the regulations that ended leaded gasoline. Now, we know, we can look at Flint, Michigan. We know we have sadly, a horrific little experiment there. What happens to children when they are exposed to lead? Well, we have 56% rise over the course of the past 5 or 6 years in the number of special needs kids because of their lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is lead is a neurotoxin. Here are the crime rates dropping from
It starts in 93.
I can't see what
93
those
to 2015.
Yeah, they're there. They drop precipitously. Now, stop and frisk ends 5 years ago. No change in crime. Ben Shapiro's talking out of his arse.
He doesn't have
what
the,
he says, like,
he
you
doesn't
even
have the
break down what he
stones
says.
to admit it.
Even when you break down what he says, he has no. You can tell he has no idea what he's like. Relative to the general crime statistics, what? What are you talking about?
Stop and frisk, you can see, starts up significantly into that precipitous drop and doesn't really have an effect on it.
Ben does do a lot of high school debate. I don't know what I'm talking about, filler.
General crime statistics. You can see that it's clearly, and first of all, he's lying. To the extent that I can decipher what he's saying, it's not true.
It was also 20 years after Roe versus Wade. Do you think that had an impact? Fewer unwanted babies?
That's conceivable, but I don't think so.
That's the Freakonomics. That's a Bloombergian path.
Because there is evidence of the lead across the globe, actually. You see this internationally. And nevertheless, we do know that stop and frisk.
It starts after this massive drop here. Like stop and frisk, the numbers really start taking off here.
It
has absolutely no relationship here.
Michael Bloomberg is an authoritarian Republican. Yes. There's a very simple way of understanding what his politics and ideology are.
And this run shows purely the appetite for authoritarianism among liberals.
Yes, and that goes back to the Adler research on which part of the population desires authoritarianism the most, and it was centrist in that research. I mean, that might bode well for him in the primary, but he's an authoritarian Republican. Period. There's no hyperbole in that. What other way would you describe his politics?
And it doesn't even do what it claims to be doing.
It uses a long-term trend to it just leeches off of it to justify terribly repressive policies.
We got one more clip from Donald Trump when he was up in New Hampshire. He went up there. And he, 4 years later, I guess, 3 years later, is still repeating the same lie that he was repeating almost right after the election as to why he did not win the popular vote. This was incidentally studied by the administration. And
the Trump administration.
Yes. And it was debunked by them. Go ahead, play this.
Because, you have some pretty strange election laws here, right? Remember last time we won the primary tremendously? We should have won the election, but they had buses being shipped up from Massachusetts, hundreds and hundreds of buses. And it was very, very close, even though they did. But this year, we have a great governor.
This was debunked by their own by the New Hampshire voting officials. We had, I think, Kobach's entire commission was set up. There are fact checks all over it. And there was a voter fraud commission that met in New Hampshire. I think I interviewed one or two, one of the secretaries of states or one that knew one that was on it. They all had to resign because the whole thing fell apart. So I don't know if it's just ignorance or just evilness on his part.
It's invisible buses.
Once I believe it once, I never not believe it. That's the way I do it. He's going to keep doing that. But the only difference now is that he has a Department of Justice, an Attorney General, who I think is willing to help in such fictions. And I think he's going to, if necessary, leverage such fictions ahead of time. It's one thing to do it in retrospect. I would have won the popular vote, but for all of those millions of illegal immigrants who were bussed up from Massachusetts. They just huddle on the border. They hide out at Phillips Exeter Academy or wherever it is. and then they get up on these buses and they shoot them right up. They go right up.
Cool your heels and Phillips Exeter.
And
then go up and vote.
That's right.
Don't just vote once. Vote 3 times.
We're gonna go in buses. We're just gonna go from Durham to Manchester. We're gonna go down to Nashua.
Meet your totals. Do a ski weekend.
But I think next time in the election, I think they're gonna weaponize it beforehand.
Never has cheating and someone's personal psychopathologies been so synchronized in the history of Earth. Like what Donald Trump personally needs to believe about what happened in order to not freak out, namely that he did not get more votes, and the way you rig a national election is perfectly synchronized.
Here is Van Jones on CNN. This was last night. As the election results come in, we're starting to see more of this slowly, where there's a certain hedge now you're starting to see from people where they're like, well, maybe we really should pay attention. There was a Reuters article, apparently, where the headline was, what was it? Buttigieg comes in second, Warren comes in, Klobuchar comes in third, and Warren comes in fourth. Just didn't mention who won.
If you don't talk about it, it's not happening. Those are the rules.
Here's a list of Vice compiled of different headlines that exclude Bernie.
Sanders won, but he's not the big story coming out of New Hampshire. Klobuchar nabs third place in New Hampshire, exclaims, "Hello, America." Our comeback kid, Klobuchar seizes her moment. The real winner is Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar, surprising strength. New Hampshire gives Klobuchar a major boost, puts Biden and Warren on life support. Just no... Nevertheless, there are people who are starting to come out. Jonathan Chait wrote the other day that yesterday that, Bernie Sanders is not a horrible human being, and I would support him in the general.
That's what we call a knee bend.
Everybody's selling out. I'm going to get killed.
Here is... the thing about Van Jones that is very helpful is if you need to know which way the wind is blowing, he will let you know.
Bernie Sanders is a phenomenon. He doesn't get any attention. People don't talk about him. He just continues to rack up these big numbers, these big margins. And he's doing stuff that we don't talk about enough. He's appealing to young people and people of color increasingly, and women, and the beer track voters that people talk about for Biden. They're showing up for Bernie Sanders. He's got an army of unbelievable donors. If anybody else had all that, we'd be saying this guy's our guy. For whatever reason, we continue to talk about everybody but Bernie Sanders.
That's true. That's true.
His true Maoist nature is coming out, I guess. Didn't Van Jones used to be a Maoist?
He did, yeah.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, you better freshen up because we're taking names. I, Bernie Sanders, call for a complete and total silencing of Chris Matthews until we figure out what the hell's going on.
He used to be a Maoist, now he wears glasses.
Indeed. Quite the progression. Well, I think it's probably going to be a good problem to have when some fraction of the establishment starts bending the knee to Bernie. They're going to be making demands. They're going to be trying to pull him to the right. But the fact that they are starting to come around shows that he is succeeding.
Yeah, I think they're basically positioning themselves in like I'm not going to die on this hill. I was just trying to basically injure myself on it. And
Denmark.
But again, this is not to say that this is a fait accompli by any stretch of the imagination. I think so far Sanders has underperformed at least expectations, certainly theirs probably, and certainly mine. Nevertheless, still in the lead, and there is a fracturing amongst the more conservative, supposed moderate wing of the Democratic Party. I would say probably the issues for a lot of people in the media and the politicizzency. What do you call that?
Politigentsia
is just a function of Sanders being, sort of outside the loop of the gravy train that rolls for a lot of people within politics. But Amy Klobuchar, who got so much acclaim from last night, she is also yet to really receive any significant scrutiny. There was stories that came out when she first entered the race. In fact, just before she did, if I'm not mistaken, it was former staffers who were basically trying to convince her not to run because they were aware of major liabilities that she had in terms of the way that she treated former staff. Some of those stories came out then. I don't know if all of them have come out. I've heard that that is not the case, that there are more, but who knows? Maybe that's just rumors. But that happened for a couple of days when she came out. Then it quieted down, I think in large part because she was not doing very well. And people felt like, what's the point of bringing these things up and having to own these things when it's not going to matter anyways? Well, now it's starting to matter. And so we're going to start to hear a little bit more. In fact, the first place that we heard it, sort of surprising, is was this today or yesterday? Can we check? Because she's still up in New Hampshire, so I suspect that maybe it was yesterday during the actual voting. And here is Sunny Hostin. Is that how I pronounce her name? From The View.
And it was yesterday.
Okay, this is yesterday. This is the day of the voting. Sunny Hostin, who is of The View, she apparently is a former prosecutor. I did not know that. And she has a surprise. I gotta think that Amy Klobuchar went on The View and did not anticipate this type of questioning.
Well, a Washington Post poll from last month had you with less than 0.5% of African American support. That's lower than even Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He has 2%. And I've said this often on the show, you need African American support to become the Democratic nominee. Now, your tough on crime approach when you were a county attorney in Minnesota is criticized for disproportionately harming black and brown people. And when I look at that record, you failed to prosecute a single killing by the police during the 8 years you headed prosecutions. And there were more than 24 police-involved killings in that period. That's just one example. How do you defend that record?
Okay, well, let's start. I'll lead out to the support, but I want to start with my work as county attorney. We all know there's systematic racism in this criminal justice system. There's no doubt about that. And I worked really hard when I was there.
You know what's fascinating about that response? It's exactly what Pete Buttigieg said when he was questioned. There's systematic racism. I'm going to acknowledge that. Therefore, I am, in many respects, offloading some of the responsibility for my participation, not just participating in the system, but running the system.
Executing it.
Well, this is part of the Adolf Reed critique of essentializing, which is if I learn certain speech and discursive acts, I can actually just say, like, I acknowledge and
have no
really, what can
responsibility.
you do about it? Because it's an immovable thing.
She is saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. And, but the game would fall apart if the key player like you are doesn't play.
Really hard when I was there, and I'm proud of the work we did to go after white-collar criminals, to use drug court in a big way. We had a very successful drug court, and we actually got a 12% decrease in incarceration rates for African Americans. And I also diversified the office, which I think is really, really important. But there is so much more work that we have to do. And that's why when I got to the U.S. Senate, I started working on things like the First Step Act, which we passed, which has decreased the criminal penalties and allowed some nonviolent offenders to get out of prison. I think we have to do that in a bigger way as well. And then as for my support in the African-American community.
We'll skip this and just go a little bit ahead here to where Sunny Hostin follows up.
When they turn 18, I think that is going to matter. I'm the leader on the bill to get rid of gerrymandering, to get rid of voting purges. As my friend Stacey Abrams, who go ahead.
Senator,
I have a black friend. Go ahead.
As my friend Stacey Abrams, who go ahead.
Senator, I think that your record as a prosecutor matters as well. And when you campaigned for the Senate, you cited your prosecution of 16-year-old black teenager Mayan Burrell as an example of having been an aggressive prosecutor. And it gives me no pleasure to say this because, as you know, I was a prosecutor as well. I've reviewed the facts of that case, and it is one of the most flawed investigations and prosecutions that I think I have ever seen.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, listen, folks, I'm not a mind reader, but I am sometimes better. And I would wager that what is happening right now in Amy Klobuchar's mind is when I get a hold of the staffer who set me up in this interview and did not know that I was going to be asked these questions, there is going to be hell to pay.
There's a stapler with someone's name on it.
When you look at it, you have your homicide detective on tape offering informants $500 a piece for names. When I looked at it, I also saw that Mr. Burrell's alibi witnesses were not looked at. His surveillance tapes were not looked at. I mean, how do you defend something like that to someone like me who is the mother of a black boy, a black teenager? This case would be my worst nightmare.
Well, Sunny, I'll start with this. I've been very clear. All of the evidence needs to be immediately reviewed in that case. The past evidence and also any new evidence that has come forward. I've called for that. And I think you and I both share that background. And I have always believed that a job of a prosecutor is to protect the innocent and convict the guilty. But protect the innocent has to be key. So this case involved an 11-year-old African-American girl who was shot doing her homework at her kitchen table. I got to know her family, and I worked with them. But I would say, I think any prosecutor who cares about justice, and I've always been on the side of justice, would say all evidence must be reviewed immediately, and that's what I think has to happen here.
Well, you're a U.S.
So thank
senator.
you for bringing it up.
Well, you're a U.S. senator now. You're a powerful woman. What do you intend to do to right this wrong?
Well, I've called for the office and the courts to review the evidence. That is what we must do in the justice system. I've also worked extensively with the Innocence Project in my previous job, and we reviewed all the serious cases we had that involved DNA evidence. This one didn't, but we reviewed those cases.
It had no gun, it had no DNA evidence, and it had no fingerprints.
Are we prosecuting Amy Klobuchar
So this is
today?
a case that must be reviewed. Sonny, I think you know that I care so much about justice, and this case must be reviewed.
Yeah, there's Joy Behar saying, are we prosecuting Amy Klobuchar?
Yeah, that very bad look for Joy.
Yes,
I actually
we are.
I love the idea of Amy Klobuchar, like in like De Niro kind of movie, like with the stapler, just being like, some people say I do it because it's fun. Other people, maybe because maybe you haven't heard this before. Maybe you heard too much. My dad was a drunk. She starts telling the same story. Yeah. She repeats all the time. I put a black kid in jail for life without any evidence. You know why? I thought it might swing 2 points in a suburban district. You don't think I won't force you to shave my legs?
When you pivot from the question of the innocence of one person regarding a crime to how the crime impacted the victim, you know that you have a bit of a problem. I mean, and
Sonny got
I don't
it.
know what happened with I think that was that the conviction that was thrown out, and then subsequently he was found guilty by another jury. It's unclear to me. I haven't dug into it. I have no reason not to believe Hostin there, who was a former prosecutor, but there definitely seems to be questions there, and we'll see.
I just want to say too, this is something that maybe is more minor, but this is a piece that came out a couple days ago in The Intercept. Amy Klobuchar, as a prosecutor, prosecuted possession of khat, which is an herbal stimulant grown in Northeast Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. It's used widely in social gatherings as the equivalent to drinking coffee or tea. So basically, like, she targeted primarily the Somali community for using something that's like analogous to chewing tobacco. I'm sorry, I just don't see how. I think there's some very clear political calculations behind who she's prosecuting and why, and she better start answering and talking about them.
And it's not like her hands were tied. Prosecutors have a ton of discretion.
Lastly, Nina,
we have a new drop for Amy as well.
What's that?
It's a 2-second drop.
He was abusive to the staff. He was abusive to the staff.
Oh boy, there you go.
That was worth the 5 seconds.
Shouts to the Discord.
Here is Nina Turner. She is being
Queen.
She's being asked about the reports that the culinary union in Nevada, a very powerful union, has put out both in text and flyer form, both in English and in Spanish, notice to its members that Bernie Sanders is a threat to the culinary care, which is the health insurance that the culinary union offers. This is a problem in Nevada for Sanders, and it is a very unfortunate one that the union is placing their own health insurance program above the sort of the candidate who is the most aligned, I think, with union and labor's concerns. It's interesting, maybe after the fact, if you can leverage this on some level. I don't know that it shows Sanders, dedication to single payer and his independence, but this is difficult. Here is Nina Turner talking about how the campaign intends to deal with this.
The senator will continue to communicate. Health care for all, universal health care is a fundamental right in this country, and what we have to do is a deeper job in helping people who have that health care through a job understand that it's always tenuous. You can be fired at any moment. Your employer can change your insurance at any moment. So why not join with the rest of your sisters and brothers in this country and help to guarantee health care as a human right and not have the union see that as a threat against something that they have? We're going to keep.
We'll see. That's going to be a major issue in the context of that campaign in Nevada.
I think you got to hit both of those points, but I think the first one is more salient for people. Like, hey, you're sitting easy now, but it could be taken at any moment.
Yep.
Look at how they threatened the GM workers during the strike. You got to be strategic about this.
Yeah, I would like to dig into where this is coming from a little bit too. Is it coming from the rank and file, or is it coming from the union bureaucracy and the leaders? Because oftentimes unions don't have enough democracy, and bureaucrats and leaders have different interests than the workers do.
Well, I mean, in this instance, it's definitively coming from the leadership. I mean, they're the ones who are putting out the flyers and the communications. I mean, I would imagine they're the only ones who really have the ability to do that on an official channel.
That's the leaders. Can I do a real quick call back here? I'm sure we'll keep talking about this, but when the judge ruled that the NYPD was engaged in systemic racial profiling, Bloomberg called her, quote, some woman who knows absolutely zero about policing and will be responsible for a lot of people dying.
Yeah, turns out no. I'm going to read a bunch of IMs and then we're going to get out of here. Folks, Colorado guy, the lifestyles of the obscenely wealthy and disproportionately powerful cannot be sustained without the price of environmental devastation, the complete undermining of human dignity and rights being paid. The only way the status quo continues in this country globally is the establishment retaining power. Revolution, if it's going to happen, has a long looming countdown timer that's running low. Much love, MR Crew. Bernie 2020. Sam, I think you're mixing up a scenario, says Kinetic Comrade, that involves Bernie dropping out prior to the convention with a scenario where the candidates at the convention support the candidate with the most votes, which Bernie did in 2016. If the rest of the candidates want to stay in the race until the convention, but ultimately pledge support to the vote leader at the convention, that's fine. I don't think Michael is saying that the other candidates with less votes must drop out before the convention. Left is best. Well, my point is that part of the reason why Clinton and Sanders ostensibly stayed in the race is because you could theoretically get other delegates that would and Clinton did this in 2008. You could theoretically get other delegates that would put you over the top if the other candidate had not achieved 50% of the delegate count yet, which Clinton had not, and I believe that Obama had not. That's my point. Sanders polling in first place in North Carolina with 25% over Biden with 19%. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine these numbers are going to be the same, right? I mean, Biden's completely gone, I have a feeling.
Bye-bye.
Bang Bart. Loving Sam's demoralizing Gen X cynicism all morning, basically telling his entire audience there's no point. What? Don't be happy about anything. If you're making plans to travel to Nevada, canvas, and you should cancel. I'm not saying that at all.
Give up.
We can't
Nothing
take
will
anything
ever
for granted,
happen.
people.
Just insult Michael Bloomberg a
Black
little
pill
bit
Sam.
and sit back and wait to die.
Bang Bang Bart.
I don't find comedy funny anymore.
Let me be an anecdote to Sam. Go out there and canvass. Bernie won Iowa and New Hampshire. He absolutely can. I think he will win. I definitely think we should make the convention about democratic legitimacy, and don't be black pilled by Sam.
Onward to Berlin, says Bang Bang Bart. Colin from Nebraska. Shout out to my friend Ryan. He told me he wants to pay attention more to politics, but is overwhelmed with the amount of information. I sent him the AM Quickie, and he's been liking it a lot. Nice. Recommended it to him a month ago. Oh, great. JJ Cool. Hey, Sam, thanks for the great work you guys do every day and sometimes night. During your week off, would you be willing to extend the AM Quickie in order to keep us up to date? 55 minutes might be enough with a handful of public calls. Thanks, MR. Bull Prague. The story in New Hampshire is to be a registered voter, you need your car registered in the state, too, affecting college students. Yes, but I think that they have to register after the fact. They have 2 months, I think, to get their car registered. So I think what we're going to see is maybe a problem with that, but not so much with the actual voting. Kindergarten cop. In 2016, Trump got a larger share of the black vote than almost any modern Republican. Recent polling has shown his support among black voters growing. Quiet! Stop telling people to stop canvassing. Is there any concern that this will translate to real votes?
You can canvass if you want, but it all
doubling-
makes
if you
no
wanna
difference.
waste your time.
If you want to, let me just say 3 things. 1, I think Tom Perez is a nice guy. You should trust the DNC. 2, it's all hopeless. And 3, just sit back and listen to the AM Quickie and wait for the tides to take us all.
A doubling of black support for Trump would be fatal for Dems in 2020. Yes, I agree.
And that will happen if you nominate Mike Bloomberg. I mean, I like, honestly, like, or Pete Buttigieg for that matter.
Pickpocket Rick. Where can I get an MR mug? Soon. In our store, soon. A square. But Sam, that is the idea to get us all fatigued. Like Randy Rhoads used to say, in chaos they can steal, and I will add, lie, repeatedly propagandize hard, and continue to dismantle the so-called administrative state. You recall, I called in early January concerned about my fears of a fracture in the Democratic Party. We all need to be in the streets if the Democratic establishment stops Bernie or Minister Barr calls for general election investigators or goes to SCOTUS to get mad at King to stay in the White House. Doe Link. Gabbard supports Donald J. Trump for dismissing Vindman. Yes. Senator Pug, I convinced my mom to caucus for Bernie in Nevada, and after New Hampshire, she donated to his campaign and signed up to volunteer. Nice.
Hell yeah.
Union hack. Just an FYI, on the culinary union, the president's father was in the Nicaraguan military and fled the country due to Sandinista revolution in 79. First stop was Miami.
Final reckoning.
We meet again.
So we meet again.
I've heard from insiders she's an old school anti-communist. So anti-Sanders is not just rational economist. Interesting.
There is going to be some split between leadership and rank and file.
I
I don't know
hope
how
so.
big, but
Right.
there will be some.
Yeah, a lot of unions don't even consult the rank and file on endorsements. It's crazy.
0099. New Hampshire made it harder for college students to vote. Yes, I know that. Yes, a Republican-backed law took effect this fall, requiring newly registered voters who drive to establish domicile in the state by securing New Hampshire driver's license and auto registrations, which can cost hundreds of dollars annually.
That's insane.
Most college students, from what I read from that article, was that they were not aware of that. So really, what is happening is when they register to vote and they vote, that establishes that they're domiciled in New Hampshire, and thus they have a 60-day window, I think, to register cars. So this could hurt in the future, but maybe...
Why should cars have anything to do with voting?
Well, because you want less young people to vote.
Well, the idea, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think,
Like, what is even the rationalization of this?
The rationalization is if you vote in an area, then you are domiciled there. And if you're domiciled, then you need to have your car registered there.
I literally just switched my driver's license to New York this year, and I've lived here for 16 years.
I still have a North Dakota one.
Do you have a car here, though?
I do.
Is it registered in New York?
It is.
Okay, well, so you've done that already. It's not your license. It's your car registration.
That's annoying.
Yeah. Murr, 101010. Sam, exactly. About the kids and their whims needing to bring an abrupt end and any autonomous enjoyment or peace that you may be enjoying. Sorry, but if you think it'll fully end, think again. My 20-year-old still says peep, and I kick into responsibility mode. Somehow they want no part of us at other times. Drink in those moments. Thank you. That's very sweet. Joyce from Pennsylvania. How about Bernie supporters quit being dicks online? Follow Jamie's advice. Be happy warriors. The online nastiness makes Bernie's job harder. I think that's true. Retcon. I would really like to see Mayor Pete get invited to play in a game of congressional baseball. Western Masshole wanted to update you on the Alex Morse campaign. He's going back and forth with Richie Neal about where and whom they are fundraising from. Morse did not hit his goals and could use some help. I don't know if I've interviewed him. I meant to. Melissa from Chicago. Now that Yang has dropped out, I want to push my idea. UBF. We expand food assistance to everyone. The infrastructure exists. So, give everyone an EBT card. It would cut down on food waste. Interesting. Rogan
Commissary for all
made the caucus. For all the socialism talk and fear-mongering about Sanders, it would be nice to hear some people warning about the actual fascism coming from Trump. P.W. Skyan, what's your buddy Cliff up to? He hasn't been on in a while. Melancholy. I had a Twitter debate with a Buttigieg supporter who said this about Bernie's plan. He is for Medicare for all. He just has a better and less obnoxious way to lead Americans to get there. I got a mess of likes. How do I even begin to respond to that? Well,
accuse him of anti-Semitism.
I mean, I would just say the experts aren't clear on how you get to Medicare for all, and it's not by not doing it. Miff Schmechter. Hi, Sam and crew. This week on Hamburgers, David Frum and I talk about the latest anti-Bloomberg hits from a honky cracker, Ben Dixon. When will these white bros learn their place? After that, David talks about his interviews with Daily Stormer reporters while working at Rebel News, and I simply sing the Star Wars. Okay. Seb Gorka's back pain. Extreme pundit voice. I don't know why people are pretending Sanders won, ignoring Warren. Last I checked, 4 is a greater number than 1. Rick from Florida. If I had a nickel every time somebody on Twitter attacked Bernie and his supporters and then whined about being criticized, I could buy my way into the next DNC debate.
Word.
Hegemony, cricket. We're trying to change Michael Bloomberg's behavior by taxing him, but he's running for president because he doesn't want to pay, he doesn't want to learn or pay our taxes. Carlos Danger. Hey, Sam, great coverage last night. I'm very grateful for Clomentum and Pete Mageddon. Dilution of the opposition who have delusions of winning plays into Bernie's locked support. I hope nobody drops out until after Super Tuesday. Made my $27 donation today. I bet that money is pouring in. Baba Booey to you all. Wolf Girl, heroin kills with overdose. Benzos kill in withdrawal. Never go off benzos cold turkey. If you're addicted and stuck without, go to the ER before it sets in. They will not refuse you. Going off cold turkey can cause benzodiazepine withdrawal syndrome. Withdrawal symptoms can last for months or years after quitting.
If people are speculating that the reason Jordan Peterson went to Russia is because no American doctor would take you off of benzos cold turkey.
Yeah. I mean, I think my understanding is what they do is they actually give you a different benzo that has a longer half-life.
It's supposed to be a man. Why are you crying so much?
And now the final IM of the day. We'll actually make it a 2:30. Tomcat. Hi, Sam. 2 words should be used to describe Bernie's campaign and movement. Rat poison. Also, even though I seriously think Pete and Chasten are too square to have a healthy, normal relationship, do you reckon that what they do... Okay, no, that's gross. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,